Hello, friends. Molly Ponfadith here, CEO of the SOAR Community Network and co-founder of the SOAR Community Nebula. We are bringing to you 1,000 Champions of Change this year, community change agents. That is our goal anyway, so we'll see what happens. And today I'm so delighted to bring to you Miss Stephanie Hepburn. Stephanie, thank you so much for being a part of our initiative.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for saying yes. We really appreciate it. And I'm so excited to share with our community who you are and the work that you're doing in the world, because it's pretty fantastic. And you're doing a lot. So I really would like for you to start off by sharing with our community who you are and currently what your focus is. How are you changing the world right now?
Thank you. So I'm the founder of Good Cloth, which is a sustainable fashion retailer. And we're online, and my background is journalism. So, I mean, for all of the entrepreneurs out there, you can do it no matter what your background is, but there's been a learning curve, obviously. And it all started because I wrote a book about human trafficking. That's the origin. So I come from a writing background. That's my love. And in researching, people really wanted a tangible approach and a tangible way that they could contribute. So I think people don't realize that there's exploitation and that there's human trafficking in terms of how clothing is made. They think of it, they go to the store, they purchase the item, that's it. That's the first time they see it. They don't realize that there's an entire story before that. And garment workers often, they can't afford to actually purchase their clothing. I mean, that's the irony. They can't, they're not making a livable wage. So they can't buy clothing. They don't have enough wages to actually find housing. I mean, it's this extraordinary story that we don't pay attention to. And part of it is that we're able to do so. We have the luxury of being able to do so. And to be honest, I wrote for a newspaper here, the Times-Picayune, as a freelance journalist for years. And I wrote as a fashion writer. And it was, during that time I was writing a book about women's roles and statuses in the world. And then I'm writing about fashion, and everyone was always like, there's a disconnect there. This isn't jiving. And it wasn't until I wrote my book on human trafficking and really started diving into what that looks like in the garment industry that I had my aha moment. And I realized, okay, here, once you know, you can't unknow. I mean, I don't know if you feel similarly, but for me, once you have information and you know what's happening, you can't go backwards. And so I started, just for myself as a journalist and just for my own family, trying to focus on sustainable fashion. And for me, that means fair wages and good to the environment. Not everybody has that perception, which ends up being a little tricky. For some people, the emphasis is much more on the environment and much less on human rights. And they're connected, and you can't really take one away and not pay attention to the other. So for me, it was very personal. It changed how I shopped for myself. It changed how I shopped for my family. And people started, and so I created an Excel spreadsheet. And what I realized was I would reach out to designers because, green-splaining is a real thing. Using the label sustainable, and not really being sustainable happens. So I started reaching out to designers and looking at them, like, can you give me, how was this made from beginning to end? How were workers treated? Let's say the item is cotton. What were the benefits that you provided? What were the wages that you provided? And just going from the final product all the way back to origin. And a lot of people couldn't answer those questions, or they just wouldn't. And until I found designers that really shared that same ethos, that's when I knew I met my people, because they were like, oh, let me tell you. And then here's this thing that we're not quite there yet, but this is what we're working on. And I knew that I had met this amazing partnership of people with the same mindset. And they're also entrepreneurs, and they're moving forward. And for them, it's not just, and this is what I see business as one day, is it's about doing something for the greater good. That's the underlying premise of business, and succeeding financially. I'm not saying, and I don't believe that shouldn't exist. They both need to exist together. But businesses should have an underpinning of doing something that's a greater good. Yeah. And so I found those partners, and it's been an amazing journey.
Well, it's perfect that you're really talking or tapping into this whole idea of where business needs to go and entrepreneurship needs to go, and it's so in alignment with this interview series that we're doing, because there are change agents, community builders, light workers, we like to call them, already out there in the world trying to create this level of raise this level of consciousness around what's my role and who am I going to be or reminded of in terms of what I came here for. How can I contribute with my gifts and talents? And I think that is really our future. Our future is that we have to tap into what is uniquely ours to contribute and think about the impact that that's going to have to all of us as a collective. We cannot have a society where we don't see each other as collectives anymore. I mean, there's just too much science, too many facts that we cannot ignore. You and I cannot go out of this planet without each other. Like,
Right.
just, and same with business, and same with how businesses and consumers and where you're going to, which is the people behind the business, the brand, right? All of the people that are not even sitting up in corporate HQ. It's everybody else, the stakeholders, everyone involved in providing that final product to you. So I
Yeah.
love that so much. Well, a part of the interview series also highlights stories of people who've touched you, stories of other community builders or champions of change or mentors who have really been an influential part of the woman that you've become. Do you have any stories you'd like to share or a person you'd like to highlight?
I think it would be difficult to choose one person. I think once you're in your 40s, it's like you've had so many different phases and existences. You've been different people. But I'd have to say the origins for me, I'd say my father. I think that would be, and my mother as well. But in terms of from a career perspective, I think my father, he's somebody who is always propelled forward to do a greater good in whatever capacity, whether it's identifying people who are going to help make changes and working collaboratively and realizing, I mean, the gift of collaboration, which is a skill that I'm still working on. As a writer, I'm much more of an autonomous worker. And I'm seeing just this, what you can do when you work together. It's so different. We have the talents that we have, but it's such, those individuals who are able to identify the talents that they're lacking, acknowledging what they're missing, and finding people who can fit that and to bring them into the fold and to move forward. To me, it is a true gift. It's something that I'm trying to develop individually. But I see that in my father. I also work at a company as the chief content officer called RI International. And I see that with our CEO, his name's David Covington. And he's somebody who, he's extraordinarily talented and intelligent, but he's able to see where he needs to pull in others in terms of moving the areas mental health. Where can he, what can he tap into in terms of human resources, people who are dedicated and have a different skill set than his own to move forward in terms of mental health crises, you know? So, and the first example of that for me was my dad, you know, just growing up with him. He's a psychiatrist, and for him, it has always been not about applauding himself. He's always been extremely humble. It's about moving forward, making positive change, and working with others to make it happen, and really actually making it happen. Because he's cognizant of what he's missing. He's cognizant of where he needs others to step in.
I love that. I love that so much. I think we spend a lot of time, even in the work that I do with developing people, developing leaders, is we do spend a lot of time uncovering your gifts and your talents. And I love the fact that you're saying, yeah, but it's also good to uncover what you're not gifted at, what you really lack, but what you desire to create. Doesn't mean that just because you're not naturally gifted to do it, doesn't mean you can't create the thing that you want to create. It just means that physically may not be the one to help advance that particular portion of your dream forward. And it's a great point because we don't spend a lot of time on that.
No,
So,
I feel like in adulthood, we are chronically trying to pretend that we know more than we do. You know, you look at kids and they have no problem saying, I don't know that. What do you mean? Explain it to me. But in adulthood, we want people to perceive us as intelligent and capable. And a potentially negative consequence of that is that we don't ask questions. If we don't know the answer, we just stay quiet, which makes us less informed.
that's very true. I think we all fall into that trap because of whatever we've been trained to believe to protect ourselves or to not show our vulnerability or our weaknesses, right? What we consider weaknesses. That's a great point. Okay, next question. This is good. I love this interview. When you think of or when you've been surrounding yourself with these wonderful champions of change and what we like to call community change agents, are there certain characteristics, attributes, anything that just consistently shows up every time you're around these beautiful, amazing, active souls?
Compassion. I think compassion is it. I mean, in life, or compassion and empathy, I think in life, the more that you're able to, even if you disagree with somebody, if you're able to put yourself as much as feasible in their shoes, you know, step into their skin as much as you can, I think it changes your perspective and your lens. Um, and I see that in every, like you said, every agent of change. That's something that they bring to the table that not everybody's able to do.
Mm-hmm. You think that can be taught?
Compassion. So I don't know. I want to say yes. I mean, so there's a big part of me that's like,
Yes.
yes, of course. And I do think that's what we're doing with the younger generation. We're these teachers. I always think, I mean, when I look at teachers, I feel like they are so incredibly undervalued for what they're able to do with these children. And they're one of our greatest gifts. I can't do what they're able to do. And that's a reality. When they bring compassion and teach our children to think about somebody else's viewpoint. So I think it can be taught. I think it also takes, aside from those early years, I think it takes willingness. And somebody, you know, sometimes we're so determined and blind and willful in that ignorance. We're like, this is our stance, this is what we believe, and we don't, no matter what that position is, we don't necessarily want to let in information that might alter our perspective. And so I think it can be learned and developed, but I think it takes that person to be willing to do so. I think that might be the key component.
Mm-hmm. And for those that were not exposed to it, like you said, from childhood, and they don't know what they don't know, it becomes more of a practice, a mindfulness practice. Like,
Yes.
I need to pause for a second. I feel like I've been trained to be compassionate in this moment. How do I do that? And it's not an impossible, but it is practice. I mean, when you know, and when you've been trained or you learn how to be more open-minded, how to listen, how to look longer at someone as they're speaking instead of just waiting to respond, those little things practice over time becomes this whole concept of compassion, right?
Yeah.
And I think it can be taught. It's just the practice part is a personal choice, and not everybody makes the time to do that.
I love that.
Okay, so when you think of all your amazing gifts and talents and life experiences and the challenges that have helped to groom you into this person that you are today, what movements and causes specifically, if you'd like to share and or feature any, are you advancing with those gifts, your energy, your love, and your talent?
So I think my number one love is writing. From a career perspective, that's what makes me feel alive. And I think, but I don't think that's necessarily my biggest skill set. I think my biggest skill, my strongest skill, is that I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid. And it's interesting because I'm not braver than anybody else. You know, I've been trying to talk to my daughter, she's 11 years old, about how important it is to fail. And she's like, what do you mean? But it's important, because otherwise, if people are so fearful of failure, if you fear failure, you're not going to step outside of your box. You're not going to try new things. And so I think in terms of writing, in terms of good cloth, I think those are the elements, that's the element that pushes me forward, because for me, there's beauty in the journey and there's learning in the journey. And if I fail, then I learn something. It's not truly a failure. And I think risk taking, just having more of a growth mindset, you know, I think people have so many gifts and so much to offer the world. And when I talk to people who want to be entrepreneurs, failure that's the hang up. That's it. You know, and I think if you get over that, if you get over, okay, worst case scenario, you fail. Now what? Was it worth doing it? Yeah, it was worth doing it.
You know, as you share that, it almost reminds me of all of us as human beings, this fear of death, right? Because when we have such a humongous, huge fear of death, that's when anxiety, that's when all these other things that really stop us from living. I mean, we're just worried about that moment, that day, versus everything that we miss along the way, because we allow that fear of not being here to just take over everything else. And I think that's the same with fear of failure. That's the same with fear of everything that makes us feel like the fear of the unknown, right? We spend so much time worrying about the unknown as if it were always going to be negative, that we forget that perhaps the things that we're missing in this moment is going to lead us to a beautiful unknown, a more fruitful experience or existence, right? After turning the corner.
Right.
So I think that we do get so caught up in fear and anxiety, and coming from that place of worry or a lack, versus thinking about what we already have, the gratitude, the sense of abundance, the fact that we are privileged, right? The fact that you and I can have this conversation over Zoom and connect with one another from different parts of the world and share stories that matter. We live a good life if we're able to do this. Yeah. Okay. So, and talking about inspirations and motivations and living a good life, is there a philosophy or a quote or a motto?
Yes.
You,
of course, I'm going to have to read it to you.
Okay, that's fine.
It's by an author. It's not surprising. His name's Kent Harif. He's the author of Plain Song. And so this very much goes with what we've been talking about. And it says, you have to believe in yourself despite the evidence. And I think that's true, right? Because we evolve as human beings. And I think we're sometimes so rigid, partially because of expectation and fear of failure, right? That we don't, you know, we look at ourselves as like this one moment in time, and we judge ourselves and we compare ourselves to others, and we look at people who have been doing this for however long, or who have been incredibly fortunate with good luck and skill, you know. And then we look at that as if that's evidence of our own failure, as it's evidence of our lack of capability. And the way I perceive it is, it's like, there's a friend of mine, and he's an artist, and he started out, he was good. He honed his craft to now where when I see his work, I get chills. He looked at the evidence, which was his paintings, and he saw, okay, like this may not be the best that I am capable of, but he didn't see that as a limitation. He saw it as, okay, I'm going to keep trying and trying and trying. And I think I don't know how the author meant it, but that's what it means for me, is that despite the evidence that you perceive at this moment in time, you are an evolving human being. And you're going to be somewhere else in a year or 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. And you can't take that one moment to determine your worth and your capabilities. You have to realize that you are an evolving human.
Mm. It reminds me of a conversation that I had recently with a friend who was struggling through where she is now and where she was and the community that she thought would support her. And we were talking, and I said, you know, it's interesting throughout my own life too, when you look at a human being and you are going through a journey and you graduate from a particular place or phase or or the version of you, and you grow and you learn from all the mistakes. A lot of times the people that knew you in that moment in time are also the ones that don't allow you to graduate from that, right?
Oh yeah.
They don't see that a person, a human being, can truly evolve and become something different, something else. And so I think it's also important to just know that your evolution is taking place, even if there's evidence around you that people don't believe it or don't buy it or don't allow you to move from how they knew you. And I think that's really important to know, to have that compass internally that says, yeah, I've grown, I've advanced.
Yeah,
So that's really, I mean, I just love that point, because I think that's very, very important for us to know that we are allowed to grow.
I agree. I think the other thing is, you were talking about community and people not letting you grow. And I think in part that's because we don't like change. Humans don't like change. We don't like it. And so we all kind of put each other in boxes, and so I can feel compassion for that, right? They're like, well, I know you as this person, and they're struggling with those changes. That doesn't mean that person shouldn't evolve, but I do understand that resistance. I think that it's also that people need to understand that nobody can see inside of you. Nobody can see what your capabilities are. Nobody can see where your star is going to shoot. They might make assumptions. They might have judgments. They might make judgments on who you are, your potential, your capacity, your intelligence. They can't create that ceiling for you. That is not their right. It is you to determine where you're going to go. And that's it. And that's where your confidence, I've been thinking about this a lot, that's where your core sense of confidence should be coming from, is this idea, this knowledge that you get to make those determinations, nobody else.
Yeah. Wow. Well, as you think of or imagine a better world, what does it look like? What does it look like through your eyes?
I mean, I guess I probably will sound repetitive, but I think people acknowledging their weaknesses, acknowledging their biases. You know, we like to pretend, oh, we have no biases. And by not acknowledging our deficits, by not acknowledging what we don't know, we stay stagnant. And by not being able to take risks, and being dominated and ruled by fear, we don't step outside and we don't grow. And so I think that's, to me, that's the world that I hope for my children, my children's children, and that they're able to look at problems in a creative way, turn them in unique ways, and not be scared to be wrong, that they tried something and it didn't work out. I want for everybody to be able to take leaps. I mean, of course, calculated leaps, and accept that fear is part of the journey, and so is failure, and just surpass it, go beyond it.
Well, Stephanie, what are some ways, one or two ways, in which our community can support you right now? How can we help?
So I'm on Twitter. It's Steph Hepburn. That's my Twitter handle. And Good Cloth, obviously. And I just launched a publication, a website, and it's called Crisis Talk.
Wow.
And the website is crisisnow.com/talk.
Okay.
And what I want is to bring in diverse perspectives on the crisis experience. So that means people with lived experience. That means first responders. That means teachers. Anybody who is coming into contact, that means siblings, that means family members, anybody who's coming into contact with that crises, that mental health crises, so that there can be diverse lenses and perspectives, and we can start a dialogue. The whole point, what I want is for there to be dialogue about it and a conversation, a positive, constructive, moving forward conversation.
So powerful. Thank you so much for all that.
Thank you.
You have
Thank
so
you.
many amazing things going on. You're also a mom, which is in and of itself such an incredible, incredible blessing to have that experience. But it's also a lot on top of mothering all these different initiatives and projects. And it takes a beautiful soul, a very determined soul, someone who's not afraid to fail, obviously, and to learn from those challenges. I really value the time today. I thank you for being a community builder and a champion of change and for change. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So appreciate you. Everyone watching, I hope you got inspired as I did. I could talk to Stephanie for a long time. We don't know each other very well, but I feel like she's a soul sister, and I hope you felt the same love.
I do.
That we felt today for you. So for those who are watching, please remember, you're amazing. You're doing incredible things. We want to feature you. So please nominate yourself. Nominate somebody else in your community who's making a huge impact. We are trying to and would like your support in featuring 1,000 champions of change this year, and we cannot do that without you. So please visit us at nebula.soarcommunitynetwork.com. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon, everyone. Bye.